Hi, folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. I saw a news article from Dallas, Texas, in the United States, where there's quite a large sort of housing estate that is, so the article claims, that's exclusively for Indians only. No whites allowed in the United States. This is no whites allowed in this housing estate. Without doing a super serious drill down, the financing, the construction firm, the building firm, they're all Indians, and they're out to look after their tribe and their brethren. And the Indians, if anything, are very tribal, and once they move into another country, they put their own tribe first. And the locals, well, too bad. And if you've ever wondered, as I have, how a whole street or a suburb can within a few years can become, or a street almost overnight, and a whole suburb of 20,000 houses, and it can all become Indian, or pretty much all Indian in a year or two. Maybe this sort of sheds some light on it. So I'd like to talk about this. Now, Western governments are clearly not doing anything to stop this, and they should. If white people did it, it would be international headlines and an absolute outrage. But if brown or black people do it, then it's And recently in the United States, there was a small group of white people that bought an area of farmland, and they wanted to create their own sort of club community. It just happens there's only white people. We're fascist, it's swastika, it's end of the universe. But when brown people do it or black people do it, that's self-determination. Oh, what a wonderful thing. So we can see just how differently these things are treated, and how some can just slip quietly under the radar, while others, even if it's a small issue, there was a newspaper article here recently in Australia that I read, where they identified suburbs in or areas of Australia that are more than 90% or more white. And they effectively said all these areas are breeding grounds for neo-Nazis, fascists, swastikas, Hitlers. That's the insanity of the narrative that we're seeing these days. But when a suburb's 70% black, that's considered to be, how diverse, how wonderful, the diversity, so it shows how much the narrative is being controlled by the globalist propaganda machine. But coming back to this thing in Dallas, now, I don't know, the company's denying it. They're saying, well, it's just purely an accident that only Indian people live in the suburbs that they construct. Just an accident, just kind of how it happened. I don't know. It's just now that some would say that's clearly a grotesque untruth, but nonetheless, these people are backpedaling and trying to deny it and so on. But I want to look at the bits that sort of fit together on this. Now, somehow, and just as another aside, the Australian government, the leftist, fully globalist controlled Australian government, has substantially increased, very substantially increased the migrant intake, particularly from India, so that there's something in the order of 250,000 plus Indians coming into Australia every year, or certainly over the last previous 12 months. And this number is around 40% higher than even the highest estimate. So the estimate before was between 250 and 350,000 total, absolute net total. And instead, it's almost 500,000. And 250 to 300,000 of those are from India. So that just shows you how many Indians are being brought in, and why entire suburbs suddenly become Indian overnight. Now, this is the thing that I've got here. Now, you're from India, your qualifications, the corruption amongst immigration agents in India are just off the charts. Everybody in India is gagging 10 times over to come to the rich white West so they can loot and parasite off the society that white people have built, and they think it's their right and entitlement to do it, by the way, and outrage if anyone even questions that. So the Indians are arriving, and the corruption in the process is off the charts. And the idea that these people are being vetted, do they have the work experience? Do they have the qualifications? All that sort of thing. That's just corrupted out of the safeguards almost don't exist. These people can waltz in with no experience. Maybe the only work experience they've ever had is working in a family business, or working as a stooge in a family business where all the flunkies do the work, and you swan around looking and sounding important. So the idea of these people are some net benefit or whatever to Australia is beyond absurd. They're not, and yet they come in en masse, and they nearly, with rare exception now, they almost all walk straight into a job. Now, how do you come from another country? You speak with a very heavy accent. You've got no work experience, no actual work experience. You might claim you have, you don't have it. You've got no qualifications. And they're not walking into jobs, like a toilet cleaner. They're walking into jobs like chief purchasing officer or chief procurement officer, and engineering manager, and all these sort of. They're walking into those sort of jobs, particularly if government departments, government quangos, or wherever government has influence. For example, big engineering firms that rely almost 100% on government tenders and government work contracts, and also where the government is protecting, like in the finance industry, government protection plays a huge role in the finance industry, so that Indians pour into that in mass. Now these people are walking straight into a job. Now no white local person could get a job under those circumstances. Hey Billy Bob, what sort of work experience you have? I worked for my dad, sort of thing, but I don't know. What sort of qualification? Oh, I got a certificate from the College of Ouagadougou. Well, what college is that? So what? And then there's no way you would employ it. You just wouldn't do it. And yet somehow these Indians are walking straight into employment, like they're walking off the plane into the front door of the new job they've got. How are they doing that? That's not natural or organic. That's not even possible in the real world. No white person can get employed like that. So how can they? So there's an arrangement to give these people gifted employment, non-meritorious employment. Now, this even goes beyond DEI or affirmative action. This is a pre-arranged scam of mega proportions. Now, in addition to that, they're able to, with no work history, no credit history, no nothing about nothing, they're able to walk straight into a bank and get a housing loan to buy a house, and somehow they're being going into a suburb that's all Indian, a part of Sydney or Melbourne or wherever it is, so that's all Indian. So they're able to get a house almost straight away there. Now they get the migrant visa, they get the job, and they're able to buy property in Australia in an all Indian suburb, and working in an area, or a company or a business or a department where there's lots of other Indians. They're able to do that. It's all lines up, and it just instantly happens. Just walk into the whole thing. So when you look at housing developments, it could be apartment blocks or whatever, and it goes from they're still in the process of being finished off. No one's moved in. You go back a few months later, and the whole street is Indian, 100% Indian. How does that happen? It doesn't happen naturally. It can't happen naturally. There's got to be a few things happening here. Not only are Indians being favoured to buy these properties, but they're being denied to white people. Now, are they saying to white, you're white, buddy, you can't have it? Or are they saying, someone else paid more? How's that? Or do the banks just not loan money to white people? Is there a pre-arranged situation with the banks saying that, if it's that block of apartments or that suburb or those houses, what white people can't get a loan to buy that. You can only give those loans to Indians. Is that how? Because there's something of that level is going on. It's not a rando thing that only Indians are able to buy that property. that's not how it works. Now, there's a suburb of Sydney that 10 I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, it was pretty much an all-white suburb. You might get an odd sort of Chinese here, or I don't know, an Arab there, or something like that. But these people were pretty well integrated because they were surrounded by other white people they knew. There was, it wasn't like an ethnic enclave. And within a few years, I'd say between 3 to 5 years, it went from being pretty much all white, being pretty much all Indian. Now, again, how does that happen? Why do Indians gravitate that area? Why is it that when white people sell their houses, they only sell to other Indians? Why is that? How is it that only Indians were able to get loans to buy houses in those areas? How is it that Indians even find out about this area? So clearly there's a centralized intelligence here, an organizational structure of some sort that makes this happen. Is there an Indian buying company, property buying company that comes in and buys up properties that white, using pretend white nominees or something like that? Is it some sort of property investment firm that buys up every property for sale in that area and then only sells it to Indians? It doesn't matter at which point of the transactional chain that it happens, but it's happening. We know it's happening. And but when you get organizations such as this and such as very aggressive tribal and racially organized type supplanting of the local population as this, then clearly you're getting replacement, and they're replacing the white people, replacing white society, and so on. And that's clearly happening. It's obviously happening. Now, again, the precise details of who signs off on what and when, that we can debate and investigate, but that it's happening is beyond dispute. And yet, it's reasonable to assume, if not completely believe, that all Western governments party to this, and I would call it treachery against the local population, or all Western governments are party to this. Why are they exactly bringing so many Indians into Australia and Canada and hitherto the US, Britain and so on? Why are they doing that? What are the Indians aren't bringing anything? It's not like it's a benefit to the white Western populations, far from it. So why are they doing it exactly? There's obviously ideological reasons behind it. The globalists are coercing them. You better do it or else, and this sort of stuff. But why? I can't understand that. Why are they not being held to account for this? Again, I would argue this treachery in the scale. I mentioned a week or so ago now about an outer suburb of Sydney. This is well over an hour's drive, even in non-peak hour conditions. It's over an hour's drive outside of Sydney. And again, it was you'd hardly see a non-white face there at all, and this was only a couple of years ago. And I was there recently, and I was staggered when I looked around. There was firstly, there's apartment blocks there that weren't there before, but there's only Indians. You go past large office buildings and being built there, only Indians are coming in and out. There's only Indians. You go to the train station there, it was majority Indian and so on. And you go, wow, in 2 years this happened. But again, it just shows you the scale of the migration. It's unwarranted, it's unjustified, it's non-meritorious. But let's suppose we were looking at a situation of organic merit, not something that was stacked, fixed, arranged, and so on, as it clearly is. Now, again, I've said this before. I remember the days when Indians were first arriving in Australia. There was no special affirmative action programs for them. Many of them went back to India. They just couldn't get jobs. Somebody comes for a job, and the way the Indians do it, and I've had this experience firsthand. They manage to arrive with their uncles, aunts, cousins, and third nephews, and fuck knows what. And they go around in groups. There could be 20 of them more in the group, and they just will appear in your reception area of your office, of your business. and I am looking for employment. I'm looking for employment. And to them, they bring their whole wider family with them. So that just shows us how much family support they have. And it shows how needy they are of work. Because look at all these people I have to look at. And that's something you would do in India. And they can't say, well, I'm in a different country now, I don't behave that. They don't get that, which shows how tribally peasant they are. But this was, and they just couldn't get jobs. A lot of them would go back to India, or they'd have to just get jobs as cleaners and working in old folks' nursing homes as like the labourers for doing the cooks. And so they had to get the entry level jobs. That was all they could get. And ones that thought they were middle class and too upmarket for that, they would just go back to India. It's no good. I can't get a job. No one will give me a job. Well, why won't people give me a job? Well, I've got fake qualifications. I've got no work experience. I've got a very thick accent. I've got a very different attitude to work than Australians do. And there's just no point. I just can't. On merit alone, I cannot get a job. So they go back to India, or again, as I say, become toilet cleaners or something. But then affirmative action came in at all levels, whether it be education. Indians used to always be in the bottom classes at school, for example. As soon as affirmative action came in, they suddenly were ended up in the top classes. They suddenly started getting jobs, prestigious jobs in engineering and in finance and so on and so forth, but only after affirmative action and quotas came in. So now it's a very different scenario. So if it was organic, absolutely organic and merit-based, the number of Indians arriving would be very small. Very few would make the grade. It's only because standards have been lowered again, and then lowered some more. We're having so many Indians come in. But I do want to highlight this prearranged thing of a whole street can become Indian overnight, or a whole suburb can become Indian in 2 or 3 years. That's not organic. And I'd like to know exactly the extent of the fix, the treacherous fix, I would argue, that's in place. Because Indians think they're entitled to it. They're entitled to it, and they see they're doing nothing wrong. And if they're not contributing to the local society, who cares? They're looking out for themselves, and that's all they care about. You've been in Tassus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.